All right, Trophy Kids, we got an awesome episode for you today. We were talking about COVID in the NFL and how it's just running rampant through the Tennessee Titans. We got college updates. We're giving out our college picks. I went 5-1 last week. Tim went 4-1 last week. Not bad. And we got some final thoughts on the NBA Finals. It's a good one. Let's go. And welcome to Trophy Kids, presented by Bad News Media. It is October 9th. We're now re-recording this intro/pod because I forgot to hit record. How are we doing today, gentlemen?
I mean, doing well after we recorded 10 minutes of nothing.
Doing better now that the record button is going.
Yeah, not great. So, fans, what you missed, I introed. I think I'm a terrible person. I realized yesterday, I think one of the funniest injuries, and I can't stop giggling to myself when I see it, is somebody in a neck brace. I know it's terrible, but I was at a stoplight yesterday. I peeked behind me. This dude had a full-on soft neck brace on his neck, and I couldn't stop giggling to myself. And I legitimately felt bad about it. I was like, damn, that's a bad injury. But I couldn't stop. It's a funny sight to see. I don't know why, but I just could not stop laughing at the fact this guy was sitting there with a full-on neck brace on his head.
I just want to be clear to the listeners that I am laughing at Nate laughing at this. I do not think serious neck injuries are funny. Okay.
Yeah, you picked the most serious injury to find funny, Nate. Way to go.
It's just the visual, all right? I know it's a terrible thing. I feel bad that I find it funny, but I find it funny. I don't know why, but I find it funny.
I think it's, as I said before, I think it's because in sitcoms and stuff, usually people who are faking injuries are wearing neck braces. So they show up to court in their neck brace saying, oh, I hurt my neck trying to get, something. So it's a faux pas.
That's a good point. Yeah. All right. That might be my association with it. I can't. It just looks so ridiculous to me. So I just kept giggling to myself yesterday driving every time I looked behind myself. And I felt bad every time. I just want you to know that I legitimately felt bad, but I couldn't stop. Talking about bad things going on. Let's talk NFL COVID and eventually college COVID, because there's a bad situation developing in the NFL. Just before we hit record and forgot to hit record the first time, I saw a tweet come across from NFL Updates, which is at My Sports Update. Great Twitter account if you don't follow them. I don't know if it's a he or her, but it's a great account. They were retweeting a Schefter tweet, which is why I saw it, but they're generally very good, just background information. The NFL is moving Sunday's Titans-Bills game to Tuesday night at 6 Eastern. This is contingent on no more positive tests in Tennessee. Thursday Night Football with the Bills Chiefs will be moved to Sunday per Adam Schefter. I think this is an utter load of crap by the NFL. I think the Titans should have to forfeit this game. I think the Bills should not be penalized for doing the right thing. The Tennessee Titans, from all the reporting I have seen, have been utterly reckless in the way they have handled their COVID test. Now, in case you're not following this story closely, Tennessee Titans make up the vast majority, the overwhelming, it's like 90 probably plus % of the positive NFL COVID tests. And that is because, according to reports, they don't wear masks in the building, which we'll know definitively because the NFL is opening an investigation into this, and there are cameras everywhere in the facility. They'll have access to those videotapes. And they are still holding practices. Now, they're not at the stadium or at the facility, and we don't know if they are sanctioned by the organization, but players are getting together and holding practices at local high schools while there is a COVID outbreak on their team, going on their team.
That is irresponsible.
Irresponsible feels like a downplay of that. It's utter crap. They should have to forfeit the game, and that should be the end of it. And let's move on and see if they can play in the coming weeks. But there should be no penalty on the Bills' part or any other organization in this league who is doing the right things. Because even if you do the right things, there's a chance that your organization might have COVID rip through it. But if you're not following the policies, if you're not being precautious and you're not being safe and you're having these issues, the NFL and other organizations shouldn't have to bend over backwards to fit you in the schedule. That's my opinion on that. I don't know how you guys feel, but that's where I'm at.
I mean, it is pretty evident, too, that, other organizations are taking it seriously because there haven't been positive tests out of out of other organizations. So it does feel like other teams have been taking this very seriously, and that the Titans are just being completely irresponsible on this one.
Well, 2 points. One, we do have reports now that the Patriots have at least 3 people who have tested positive for COVID, but as was pointed out, they have moved to virtual right now. And then two, Tennessee. Tim, you were there in Tennessee with me. It was a place that does not believe that COVID exists. And I think that is a big issue or a big contributing factor for the way that the Tennessee Titans are handling their COVID. Because as a person who was there not too long ago, no one was wearing masks. Everything was open. No one was social distancing. So if you're somewhere that just doesn't believe in the virus, of course, this is what happens to your team.
Yeah, we booked a whitewater rafting trip that we assumed was going to be fine because there was a group of friends that traveled down there together responsibly. And then we get to the whitewater rafting thing and they load us up onto a bus, two to a seat. Everybody's on the bus, packed up into the bus, no masks, nothing. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I didn't really sign up for that. But here goes nothing.
Yeah, and that is definitely part of it. There's also a culture, it feels like, in the NFL, in football in general. Like, all these guys say they love football, they want a season, but they're not doing the work to actually have a season during a global pandemic because there's simple things that they're just not doing. The mask thing. I mean, in the first week of the NFL fined teams and coaches over $2 million because of mask policies not being followed. And you've seen people like John Gruden have like a thong on his face for one game, like utter ridiculousness. You see coaches pulling down their masks all the time, and it's in screaming in the face of officials or going to greet other coaches. They'll pull it down to say something. Or when they're at the facilities, you saw it in Hard Knocks, like it was sort of habit to like push it down or whatever. Or those shields, those aren't really doing much. Like,
yeah, the shields don't work.
Yeah, like it's a problem the NFL has across the board. But, and you bring out the Patriots, like right now we don't see, and there is an incubation period. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about I feel like the recklessness of having that Patriots-Chiefs game. Because of that incubation period. But you see the Patriots going to virtual, and you don't have reports of them having players organizing practice on their own. And even with the best policies in place, you're still going to – it's not inevitable that you're not going to catch COVID. Chances are you're probably going to have people catch it at some point over the season. And so that's a different story. Like, that's a different task. But it just feels like the NFL isn't prepared at all to handle the reality of our situation here.
Their policies seem to not have any teeth, right? It's not like the NBA bubble where everyone is there together, and they seem to be taking the baseball route where like we'll figure it out as it comes. And eventually baseball did figure it out to the detriment of some teams, obviously. But the NFL just seems to be very cavalier with the COVID spread.
That's actually a good example of baseball. I don't think I've heard – I know they initially got off to a very rough start, but after that I don't remember really hearing – like, teams did have issues, but it didn't seem like it was overtaking the league, I guess is what I'm saying.
If I remember correctly, it was like they had to change the culture with the players because the players kept going out so once they were able to wrangle the players together and get them all on the same page, then they were able to continue on the way that they are. Now, they could just not be reporting and just putting people on IR they're testing positive for COVID. That could be happening. And I think I saw reports that a team did do that. But I feel like if there was a big COVID outbreak in the MLB, there's no way the MLB will be able to hide it, right?
Right, yeah. And reporters are in the facilities and up their assholes and around the corner on a lot of stuff. So it's hard to hide those type of things, I feel like, in sports.
Yeah, one thing I did want to bring up too is with the NFL not being forward-looking. When we talk about like the Tennessee Titans and how they should have to forfeit one of these two games, whether that be the last one that they skipped because they weren't able to play against the Steelers, or this upcoming one against the Bills, the NFL just didn't think about this at all, and they said if there isn't a game played, they don't get game checks for that game, so you would be penalizing both teams, and the Bills haven't really done anything wrong, and the Tennessee Titans are just acting reckless.
How did that get into the agreement?
Because the NFL's players union is the worst negotiating body of all time.
We could do a whole podcast probably on that.
It's all money. They don't get their TV money if they don't play.
Yeah.
I mean, how are they playing this dangerous game with still only partially guaranteed contracts now?
Oh, it's I have had a long beef with the NFL Players Union and the head of that. Like, even I was a sports management major, so like I've studied different like players representatives, and they are by far the worst out of all the sports league, and like consistently so. It makes zero sense. We could do a whole podcast on that, to be honest. It might not be a bad idea just to do one and break down that players union, because it is poorly run from an like not the players themselves that represent their teams, but the guys that aren't in the league that help run that organization. It's terrible. But the NFL, like the best analogy I have is the NFL's essentially just Coke kingpins. Like, the product sells itself. They don't have to do much. Like that, and that's the problem. Like, I sat here on July 2nd after having a night where I couldn't really sleep because my mind was racing at 1,000 miles per hour. And I came up with an idea for a bubble that they could do. Not in one central location, bubble hubs based on divisions and then seeding after that. And, like, I'm not in the NFL. It is not my job to think of this stuff. But I was able to think of something. Now, details and logistics would have to be hammered out, and there would be a lot of work that goes into it. But the NFL had time. It's not like they didn't have time here. You could make the argument in like January or February. Maybe they were thinking, okay, this isn't going to be as bad. Like, we'll get through this, and by the time NFL season rolls around, we'll be good. But by May, they should have known they had a problem on their hand. They should have been setting up committees and thinking about this, and it doesn't seem like they have a really consistent plan. And they're just kind of coming up with it day to day as to what's going to happen. Are we going to push the season back? How are we going to schedule games? Like, it's insane at this point. They had so much time, and they saw other leagues go first.
They had the luxury of watching everybody else play, and they didn't. I mean, just one simple thing like reshuffling the schedule and adding in 1 or 2 bye weeks, just like we talked about last week. It doesn't seem like it was that hard to at least put in some small measures for something like this to happen, and they didn't do a single thing.
Yeah, it's utter ridiculous. And we're seeing that problem now kind of switch over to college. College is now starting to have outbreaks, and we all for sure saw that coming with the culture of college football. The news, Dante, you sent me this because I hadn't seen it until then. I had to look it up just to make sure because I think you sent it through a Reddit post, and it's true. Les Miles, breaking today, has tested positive, and there is a picture of Les Miles last week at the 50-yard line, 40-yard line, whatever, meeting Van Gundy, both of them pulling their masks down and hugging, talking each other like close contact. There's a problem. Like, I don't think the NFL is probably going to cancel their season. We might see a pause. I think you have to send in the National Guard for them to stop. But college, where these players aren't getting paid, they're playing with fire right now, and I worry about if we're going to lose this season.
Yeah, two things for Les Miles. He got lucky because they're on the bye week.
Yeah.
So he got really lucky. Their AD said that they expect for him to coach against West Virginia on October 17th. So I guess that's good news. He's head coaching right now remotely. Les Miles, I guess this is where I get concerned with college football and I guess any sports is like if Les Miles has it, your whole team. I know you cancel practice, but that means that your whole team and staff have been exposed to it. And if you think that in 1 week you're going to be okay and not be contagious, that's where I'm like, now you could potentially affect the West Virginia players and then infect that. And then, like you said, now we've lost football for the season just because we aren't willing to take it seriously. Another thing is like the Big 12 just isn't doing hot with COVID at all. Baylor is on its second round of canceling stuff.
Yeah, it's
because of COVID. But that's another thing, like the Tennessee thing. I think in Texas they're just taking COVID differently than the rest of the country is.
Mm-hmm. Very true. This actually applies sort of to the NFL. What they need to start doing is when there are outbreaks on teams, they need to be bubbling that team, because if they can, if for example Les Miles tests positive, they need to put everybody in a bubble until that it's like a 5-day I think incubation period before it starts showing up on tests. So where they're not having any contact, and then they get that round of testing in, and if everybody's clear, then you can go back to whoever's clear can go back to regular activities with the policies in place, and whoever's not, now you've isolated them and moved them away, and you bubbled them so they're not exposed to other risk factors where that incubation period isn't getting reset. Because like if you don't bubble them and say I'm a Kansas player and I've been exposed to Les Miles, but I don't have it from him yet, but I'm not bubbled and I'm walking around campus, and 2 days from now I get exposed, that's not going to show up in tests for another 5 days potentially. And by then we're on to the next week type of thing. So it's a problem.
It's a big problem.
The other thing that college football is doing, or that affects college football, is the great state of Florida has moved into phase 3. And so phase 3 means that all attendance restrictions have been lifted. So this not only affects football, but like concert venues and stuff too, which is not what we were going to talk about in this podcast, but it's something to think about. So during my research, I learned that the NFL and that the professional sports league never had restrictions in Florida, and the Dolphins and the Jaguars just decided to only have 13,000 fans. They decided that themselves, and they're going to continue even after these restrictions are lifted, going to continue to not have full capacity stadiums. Florida and Florida State may have full capacity stadiums. So the SEC, so at first I thought that the SEC had mandated that they didn't, but the SEC, according to something that I just read, said that it's up to each individual team to decide the capacity of their stadiums. So the rumblings is that Florida and Florida State will more than likely not have full fans except for marquee games.
Like, do you all want football? Like, that's a serious question. Like, I know everybody keeps saying it, but at this point, do you honestly want football? Because you're acting like you don't. Florida and all these other places. Like, good on the Dolphins, I guess, and the other teams for saying, like, we're not going to follow through with the entire policy. Like, we're going to restrict it a little bit. But still, like that Georgia picture from the University of Georgia game the other week. What the hell is going on?
I am surprised that we have not heard, like, oh, so many people contracted COVID from that Georgia game. That was crazy.
Yeah.
That was insane.
I forgot what school. I saw some school last Saturday, and like whenever they swept across the crowd was socially distant. Everybody had on masks. I was like, man, this is what every crowd. But I can't remember what school that was now.
Notre Dame looks pretty good with their crowd. Like, I know they didn't play last week, but like 2 weeks ago, like their crowd like seemed pretty socially distanced. Like you had to get your tickets through your roommate. Like it had to be a roommate grouping, from what I understand. Maybe that's not the case. And I think Tim, you have a family member at Notre Dame.
It is, and they keep announcing like over the loudspeaker like every so often, like, remember guys, you got to spread out. Like they have to be on the students, because it's only natural to kind of come together, especially if you're living together. I mean, I guess I don't really have that big of a problem if like all students are allowed into games and whatnot, so that you have like 15 to 20% capacity. Because I mean, you got to also remember we're dealing with like 100,000.
Yeah, these places are massive. They're not NFL stadiums.
And still not that many students are really all that interested in football either. So if they allowed just student crowd, like I think that would be kind of cool, especially if they made sure that they were socially distant like they were in Notre Dame, where they're spreading everybody out. But to try and pack in a stadium with everybody there, it's just absolutely insane.
Yeah, and the problem too isn't so much when you're sitting, it's the point of entries and the bathrooms. Like, unless everybody's wearing a mask, that's how it can spread. Now, if everybody's wearing a mask, that is extremely effective from what I understand. Like, that's a very effective. There's still a risk, but it's a very big, if everybody's wearing a mask, that's a big thing when you're in that. So, like, those are the concern areas. Not so much the stadium, it's the bathrooms and point of entries and the concession lines, I guess.
Yeah, Adam Silver, I read that Adam Silver thinks that they're going to have limited capacity stadiums when basketball comes back. I just don't know how that, like, it's one thing to be outside. An indoor stadium, though?
Yeah.
I can't see that.
Seems crazy. Yeah. Also, my Bucks look so fresh in those white uniforms. They just ran onto the field. We're recording this before Thursday Night Football. Looking so good.
Also, I just want to shout out the Big Ten Conference, because if we would have started when everyone else started, I'm sure we would be postponing and pushing back games by now.
Yes, the way some of the positive tests flew through the student body at these schools, it's a good thing that they postponed until now. Got their hands or got a little bit of a learning curve here, and they'll figure things out here on forward.
We said this on this. The Big Ten is either going to look like the smartest guys in the room or the biggest idiots if somehow the college football, which it was more the first one we all kind of said because there was really no. I don't think any of us gave it a good shot that college football was going to get through this unscathed. But because the Big Ten postponed, because they allowed kind of COVID to rip through their universities, but learn what are effective policies, see what's working in other conferences and not working in their conference, and getting that time, even though it was still a clusterfuck communication-wise, and honestly, we're probably giving them more credit than they deserve because that wasn't intentionally. So unintentionally, though, they're looking smart because they're going to be in a really good position when they kick this off to know what works, to see what other leagues do right, what they do bad, to get it under control on their own campuses, to make sure the culture is set at these different universities to have success this season. So, in honesty, the Big Ten, for all the crap they got, they might come out looking like the biggest winners here.
Yeah, I agree. They could very well look like the biggest winners, although the way things have been going, too, they won't necessarily look like the biggest winners because the SEC has been mostly playing, and so has the Big 12 with the exception of random
Baylor
games being postponed and canceled. So who really knows how this is going to end up playing out?
It's up to the Big Ten to frame that correctly as well, too. And we saw how poorly their communication was around announcing. I guess the other thing, too, is like I don't think the Big Ten could have started at the beginning or when everyone else started because remember Nebraska and Rutgers and I believe Maryland had so many cases in the beginning of in the summer leading into the fall. Realistically, I don't think they could have started.
Yeah, no.
When they wanted to. Yeah.
But it's a good segue because we got some big games. It's getting good in college football. This podcast, just so we're aware, in picks last week in our cards, Tim 4-1, myself 5-1. I mean, this is why you show up to listen to Trophy Kids podcast. The expert level football brains when it comes to picking football games here. Now watch, I'm probably gonna go like for fucking. I got an 8-team card this week. I love the board. Now three bets are in one game, so 3 of those are in one game. I'm betting that game 3 separate ways, but I'm a little scared because I do love the board this week.
There's a lot of big games, and I don't know, a bunch about betting, but man, I would be scared.
I don't like the board that much. Yeah. So good luck, Nate.
Well, let's get into it. First game we're going to start with because I think it's a 12 o'clock kickoff. Yeah, Florida, Texas A&M. This is not going to be a weather game affected by the hurricane. It's at Texas A&M. Line is at 7. Florida is favored. Over to under is at 58 currently is what I'm showing. First off, Texas A&M called that right against Alabama. Jimbo Fisher is borderline. He's starting to look fraudulent down at Texas A&M. There isn't really a reason he shouldn't be succeeding at a higher level down there. Florida, Texas A&M is in trouble for this game. Florida is coming into this with the 7th best pass offense. They're averaging 357 yards through the air. Alex Trask has 10 touchdowns in 2 games, and that Texas A&M secondary looks atrociously bad. Now, they are young in their defense, but it's a bad situation down there. Texas A&M does benefit, though. Florida's secondary, also not very good. How are we feeling about this?
How I feel about this game. This one's close to me, Nate. I really don't even know which way I would pick this because I do kind of see this being a 7-point game. I do think I think Florida's a little bit overrated, but I do think Texas A&M is not that good.
Man, that's crazy because I was just about to say I think Florida is probably a playoff team in my book.
We remember the last team that you called was one of the best teams in college football just last
week,
right?
Terrible. I can't believe they let me down like that. They got smacked. But
smoked.
Florida at least has the quarterback to that and a front line to back that up.
Yeah, I mean, the offense is fantastic. Yeah. They haven't been able to run the ball great, but, like, the passing offense, there's no stopping them in sight. Dan Mullins, I think, is, like, undefeated against Jimbo Fisher down at Texas A&M. I want to say, don't quote me on that. I do have a pick between these two teams. I'll give it out on my card, but for this part, this is also on my card. I love the over at 57 because this is a game that is not affected by weather. The secondaries are bad. And how good Florida is offensively, like I think that number should be way higher. 57 feels low to me there. I love the over.
I love the over too. I am writing that down on my card, and I like that one.
All right, next game, Oklahoma, Texas. Red River Showdown, Red River Shootout, whatever the hell they're calling it nowadays. This is going to be a weird one because the Texas Fair isn't going on. Line is set at 2.5. Oklahoma's favored. Over-under, 72.5. That's to be as expected, a high number. How are we feeling about this game? I have lots of thoughts.
This is one of those games that I really don't care what the over is. I'm taking it. That is part of my card. I really don't care. Sam Ehlinger can still sling it. I don't think Spencer Rattler's as bad as it seems. I think he's still an average quarterback. He's just not the Oklahoma quarterback that's going to come in and bail out the defense completely.
How many times has Sam won this game?
Once, I believe. Yeah, because Tom Herman's only won it once, from what I remember.
Also, Oklahoma, switching side, Oklahoma is obviously underachieving this year.
Yeah.
This is going to be such a weird game.
It's like I think it's like the first time since 2016 they've lost, or they've come into this game not ranked, or they've lost 2 back-to-back. I mean, they've lost 2 back-to-back, which is crazy. This is the epitome of all gas, no breaks. That's like how I feel about the Cowboys in the NFL, which will be part of the NFL pod on Saturday. But the defense is bad. My only fear for that over, because I'm with you, Tim. Like I would never take an under in this game, but I do worry because Texas is so undisciplined. It feels like they're constantly getting penalties. You pointed me out.
God.
I turned on that game.
Yes.
That was a sloppy football game last week. I know you have thoughts on that.
Game I ever watched.
Like
that was brutal.
That makes me nervous, like real nervous.
I'll tell you what doesn't make me that nervous is that Oklahoma's favored in this game, which just feels weird to me because I feel like the only reason that they might be favored in this game is almost because you don't see Oklahoma starting the season with 3 losses. They'd be 1-3 if they lost this game.
That is true. That probably plays a role. I think they're a little bit more disciplined. It's within a field goal, which is why I like Oklahoma here. The offense still, I don't think, Rattler's as good as obviously they've had just phenomenal college quarterbacks. I mean, talk about a run of just fantastic college quarterbacks. I like Oklahoma here. I think Tom Herman is a he's borderline fraud right now. I have a lot of thoughts on Tom Herman. But I like Oklahoma here. Before I go into my Tom Herman rip.
Borderline fraud or borderline fired?
I think both. So, yeah, Tom Herman.
He's already a fraud.
Yeah, he is absolutely a fraud. So I have always been, I texted you guys this. I was a little inebriated. I am not a Tom Herman.
We're a little aggressive.
I was very aggressive because it still pisses me off the treatment Charlie Strong got and the treatment Tom Herman gets. When Tom Herman in Texas played Missouri and Drew Lock did that weird little, I don't even know what he did, but then Tom Herman was mocking him on the sideline as a coach to a 19-year-old kid. That told me everything you need to know about Tom Herman. But let me set the stage here for everybody who maybe isn't familiar with the Texas situation. When Mac Brown left, Charlie Strong took over the program. He came from Louisville. 9 days after he was hired, actually, let me back this up. At Louisville, to give you a little bit of his pedigree there. In 2013, they went to the Sugar Bowl, and they beat Florida. It was the biggest upset based on the point spread in the history of the BCS. He went 11-2 that season, beat Florida. He went 12-1 the following year. And then he was hired by Texas. And 9 days after he was hired by Texas, Red McCombs, who, if you're not familiar, is their big donor. He's donated about $100 million to Texas. There's a statue of him in his football facility, said about hiring Charlie Strong. I think the whole thing is a bit sideways. I don't have any doubt that Charlie is a fine coach. I think he'd make a great position coach or maybe a coordinator. Are you fucking kidding me? Get the fuck out of here. A position coach. The guy just took Louisville. Some could argue built them into the program you see today with a 11-12 record and a 12-1 record. and came over to Texas. Texas was bleeding at that point. Mac Brown, legendary coach, obviously, but he was bleeding that program dry at that point. Charlie Strong took over. He changed the culture. He dismissed a bunch of players. He suspended a bunch of players who weren't buying into the system. He was not a great winning coach. That is for sure. But he was hired a month before the national signing deadline. So you can't really call that first class his. The next 2 years, I want to say he had the number one class both years in the Big 12. He was 15-20 as a coach. He didn't even get to finish out his third season. But the culture was changing. He was getting carried off the field by his players. He did win a game in Oklahoma. The nail in his coffin was he did do the unspeakable thing. You can't lose to Kansas. He lost to Kansas. That was bad. Don't get me wrong there. But
don't lose to Kansas.
You can't lose to Kansas. But the fact that from the get-go, the biggest donor was already on him. The cupboard was bare when he got there. He restocked the cupboard, he changed the culture, and he set the table and got fired, and Tom Herman came in. And you haven't heard nearly as much criticism. And you can make an argument that what Charlie Strong did at Louisville was more impressive than what Tom Herman did at Houston. And I always look back at articles. There were articles where people legitimately thought Tom Herman was the next Nick Saban. There was an article I read where they said he was going to cut that record that Charlie Strong posted in half. He's quartered by a quarter. He's 25-15 in 3 years. But give me a break. He's 7-6 in his first year, 9-3 in his next, and 7-5 in the next. And he's had all the talent. Charlie Strong changed the culture, got the culture going in the right way, got in good recruiting classes, and Tom Herman has not excelled. But you don't hear the same criticisms from, I don't know if Red Combs is still alive, to be honest, but you don't hear the same kind of criticism that Charlie Strong was getting. It is absolute crap. Tom Herman is a fraud.
I mean, yeah. And he's not, Tom Herman hasn't, he's losing recruits.
Yep.
And has been for the last, I guess, couple of seasons. Also, if I'm going to argue here, like, Tom Herman and Charlie Strong, if you strip away their names and put their resumes up at Texas, it looks strikingly similar. Like, so to your point, you didn't give Charlie Strong enough time. I'll always say this about Rich Rod in Michigan, like they just wanted him out of there, right? And so it feels the same way. It felt the same way with Charlie Strong.
Yep. If you don't have support from your donors, your assistant coach pool money goes down. I guess you could say recruiting budget goes down as well. However, those funds may be allocated legally or illegally in college football.
All above board, Tim. All above board.
Especially at Texas, a program like Texas. Definitely above board.
Yes, 100% above board. We're all good. Nobody needs nothing to see here. But I do agree. Charlie Strong, he got way too much criticism right away. But ultimately, if you don't have the back of your donors and the institution, you're not going to succeed. It doesn't matter how you cut it. I mean, he was set up for failure from the beginning. Now that almost speaks more to Tom Herman's failure at Texas, which has been a failure because he's gotten whatever he wants to at Texas because he was seen as this next huge head coach.
Yeah. And
also, Texas being this bad, like I remember being a kid and Texas, being that team. Texas has not been good since I was, I don't know, like 17 or something. Like just this many years of being mediocre.
Texas and USC have been all downhill since that game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's utterly ridiculous. And I apologize. I gave the wrong record there. He went 7-6 his first year, 10-4 with the bowl game, I believe. Yeah, overall. He was 7-2 in the conference, sorry. And then 8-5 last year. He lost 5 games. They were tied for third. And like he came in where the cupboard was starting to get full. Like he did get Sam Ehlinger. So like that team that beat Georgia, which by the way, I post this every time Texas lose. Oh hey Texas.
Longhorn Nation, we're back.
I love Sam Ehlinger going, we're back. You beat a team that was so disappointed they get into the playoff that year. Like, I don't even consider that. Like,
yeah.
It's important to point out Charlie Strong winning in the Sugar Bowl with Louisville because at that time there wasn't the playoff yet. Like, it's the biggest upset based on a point spread in the history of the BCS, which has been around since 1998. Like, it's just the criticism doesn't meet the same level. And Tom Herman had way more going for him when he stepped into the program than Charlie Strong did, which is
Now, Charlie Strong did go to South Florida and
it didn't go well there. Yeah.
So,
but
he's not above criticism.
He's now in the coaching rehab under the graces of Nick Saban. So he did join the Alabama program. He's on that coaching staff there. I like Charlie Strong. I didn't think he got good enough. Like, you could see the wheels were starting to change for Texas. And I think if he had been there, the players loved him. They carried him off the field, like, on a couple occasions. Like, they loved him. I just feel like the criticism wasn't the same. And that quote, it still grinds me. It's like the Lamar Jackson should play wide receiver type of thing. Like, it's utter crap. Like, give me a break. Charlie Strong should be the position coach. You want him to teach cornerbacks? Are you kidding me? Like, get the fuck out of here. Sorry for the language, people. This is an explicit podcast. All right, we're moving on because I'm going to continue to just get more enraged about it. I'm not a Tom Herman guy. I don't know if you noticed.
Get him out of there.
Yeah, dude, when he mocked Drew Lock, I wanted to throw my phone through the screen. Tennessee, Georgia. Yep. -12, over-unders 43. This is going to be a weather game. The hurricane is going to have an impact here. How are we feeling about this game?
I don't know. I got a coin flip on this one. Not from the winner, but from Georgia being able to cover 12.5, and then also that over-under being set at 43. I have no idea what way to go in this game because I think it'll be low scoring, but I also think it'll be a 40, 45-point game. And then I also do see Georgia winning by, I don't know, maybe 2 touchdowns if they're lucky. So could Tennessee cover? It's only 2 point. There's only 2 points there for wiggle room. I don't like either of those. So I don't know.
This is a game that it makes me sad that the bars are closed or that I can't hang out with my friends or what have this. I just want to sit back and watch whatever happens in this game. Like, there's no way I can be disappointed. Even if Georgia runs the score up on Tennessee, I cannot be disappointed in what happens in this game.
Oh, I'd love to see that too because I mean Tennessee fans are insane. So watching Tennessee just absolutely shit the bed when they get their first real opportunity to prove that they are worth something would be hilarious as well.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. From the initial analysis, like this game, one, it's going to be impacted by the weather from the hurricane coming. So it's going to be raining. That scares me. The University of Georgia's defense is unreal, though, once again. Like, they're averaging 8 points, allowing 8 points a game, 58 rushing yards, 109 passing yards. That's a problem for Tennessee because Tennessee's offense doesn't get going unless they can run the ball. And so that makes me nervous. But I'm with you, Tim, because I think it's probably going to – I feel like Georgia's going to beat them by 14. Like, I feel like that's what that's going to be. So I like Georgia here. But that over-under number, like, I'm with you as well. Like, I feel like that should be over because that feels so low. But because the weather's going to be crappy, because the defense is so good on Georgia's part, and the Tennessee defense isn't no joke, but they rely, both teams, a lot on having the run game influence the pass game, I feel like. But I feel like Georgia kind of got their swagger back last week. They kind of started getting the gears going. The train starting to leave the station on offense a little bit more. So I like Georgia at the 12.5 number there.
I don't hate that. This is much watched TV, and why I don't feel like I need to put a bet on this one either is because I can get excited to watch this one without having any money on this one.
I'm with you.
This is also, how's this game at 2:30 and not at 6?
3:30. It's probably the CBS. Yes.
I'm in
sorry.
Central Time. Sorry.
Yeah.
3:30. I think it's the CBS game. So they get one game at 3:30 from the SEC. So they get to pick their game that they want more.
This is like the quintessential
game on CBS.
Yeah, SEC on CBS game at 3:30. They always put like a good game, and that's because you got the really good game. The next game we're going to talk about before we give out our cards, Miami Clemson, but that would be wise because they'd rather have that game on CBS wants that for their SEC game when you have the Saturday night game on ESPN going to be Miami Clemson.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I cannot wait for this game. I have this game. It's my lock of the week. Miami versus Clemson. Line is 14. Over under 63. Would you all like to go first on how you feel like this game's going to play out before I jump in here?
So, of course, I'm going to go with my wild jump out the window so that Tim can squash me. I think that Clemson is going to win this game easily. Like I don't see like Miami's defense isn't it's not stellar is what I'll say. And their offense, while a very great quarterback, that offensive line we've seen fold several times. So we'll see. But I think Clemson is going to win this game handily.
Yeah, I don't hate that. This take I do not hate. I just don't know how confident I feel that it'll actually happen. Because Clemson's always good for one of those random like trip over your own feet games.
Yeah, North Carolina was that last year.
So who really knows? But I mean, I'm gonna stay away from this game from a gambling perspective, just because I am excited to watch this game as well, just like the last game we covered. So I'm gonna stay away from this game from a gambling perspective. If I had to lean, I would definitely lean Clemson minus 14, but I don't know.
I think Clemson's going to kick the shit out of them, by the way.
Well,
I knew Nate was going there, so I didn't need to go there as confidently as he would.
Yeah, King versus Lawrence, though, like that's the showdown. I have to see this.
I agree. Oh, I'm excited. Like I want to be a Miami guy so bad. And this is a pick that the Degenerate Report's not out this week. I got a little behind on writing everything and doing everything this week. It'll come out tomorrow. But this is one of my picks on the Degenerate Report. I think Clemson is going to kick the living shit out of Miami because I agree with you, Tim. Like they are good for one game a year where they kind of trip on themselves, but their schedule isn't very tough this year. This is like the one game that they're really going to need to show if there's any question as to whether or not they deserve to be in the playoffs or they want the higher seed. Like this dominating Miami is going to have to be on film for them to get that potentially 1 seed if it comes down between them and Alabama on who gets the 1 seed for the playoff. Miami, I like Miami. I'm a big Miami guy. Like I want them to be back, but they're just not there because while we're all hitting the right chords here, like Miami's defense is good, but I don't think they're good enough to shut down this Clemson offense. And the offense for Miami, King is fantastic, and he makes a lot of plays. But I said this at the beginning of the year, and I still hold this to be true. That Miami offensive line scares the living shit out of me because I do not think they are very good. You saw it in the UAB game. Like UAB was able to get pressure. Now they had to bring the blitz and other things to get there, but they were still getting there sometimes with a 4-man front, and they're not nearly as good as Clemson. And then Miami's beat up on just bad football teams recently that haven't really been able to bring pressure. Like in that Louisville game, they didn't bring any pressure. Clemson is going to be able to dominate the game defensively in any way they want because they're going to be able to get pressure with just their defensive line front, or if they decide to blitz, all hell is going to break loose. So can King make plays? I don't know. I didn't love what I saw in the UAB game, which is the only game I've really seen a team get some pressure on that offense. Mm-hmm. And these athletes on Clemson are way better. So I love Clemson 14.
Hypothetically, if Clemson loses this game but wins all their remaining games, which they have Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, that's pretty much it left. Do they still get into the playoffs?
It'd have to depend on the Big Ten schedule and how everything shook out in the Big Ten. I mean, I do still think that they would probably still make the playoffs if they beat Notre Dame. But Notre Dame's got to have a schedule where they're also fighting for a playoff spot as well. So that would be Clemson's playoff game.
Against Notre Dame. Yeah, I guess with Notre Dame left on the schedule, you still have something to look forward to. It does feel like, though, if Miami also Miami, I guess, could ruin the ACC's chances of getting someone in, period.
Well, Notre Dame is now considered ACC this year, so I think unless both of them lose, because the Big 12 is such a shit show this year, like we don't have to pretend like Oklahoma's good. We don't have to pretend Texas is good. Like they're probably not going to have a representative. So it's going to come down to probably the winner of the Big Ten will get in unless there's an epic collapse there somehow. The winner of the SEC is definitely getting in. And so as long as Clemson doesn't lose both, which I don't think, like they're my lock, so I don't think they're losing to Miami. But say they do. As long as they don't lose to both Notre Dame and Miami, I think they're probably in.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing, too. You do get Miami in if they win this game.
Miami could get in. Yeah, like that's
Miami would be in. Like if if they win this game, they're good. I mean,
They got to
uh,
win the
I
ACC
mean, I
They
think
gotta
it would
get
be
championship game, but yeah.
yeah. But if they beat Clemson, like they're good, then they
Yeah.
just
Oh, yeah, they're
solidify
back.
themselves. So like Clemson, like Notre Dame, they jumped right up into that top three immediately. I mean, one of the things to look out for in this game too is taking a flyer on Derek King for Heisman. If you want to take a long shot bet here, if he has a good game, like
What did I say week 1?
if
What did I say week 1?
he has a good game here, I mean, you can take a flyer on him.
Yeah, I mean, he could have a good game and still lose.
Yeah. I
That's-
think he's the dark
If
horse.
He has a good game against Clemson too. I mean, you get a flyer on him before this Clemson game, you can get him a lot cheaper than you will after.
I said week 1, he's a dark horse for ending up in New York.
Of course, I'm only 3 weeks behind, Nate.
Okay, whatever. I think Clemson's gonna kill them. But if Miami wins, they are full back. But I just think like Texas, like Tennessee, like all of these schools, Notre Dame, except for they're a little bit more back. Like all these schools that used to be the perennial teams in college football, just they're not. And like the big hole for me is that offensive line. And what I saw in that UAB game, like that game was closer than it should have been for a team. Now, it was week 1. It's a weird preseason. You can chalk it up to that. But they haven't played anybody super tough. Like, they beat up on Louisville and they beat up on Florida State. Like, neither of these teams could really bring pressure. So, I think that Clemson is going to kick the living crap out of them. But let's get to our cards. And then NBA Finals and wrap this thing up.
Wrap it up.
Would you like me to?
Oh, just fun fact: Texas A&M has never beaten a higher ranked team.
Really?
Yes.
Damn, Texas A&M. What are you doing?
Yeah, in the moderate since the AP poll.
Johnny Manziel didn't even do it.
He beat
Beat a higher ranked team.
Wasn't Alabama higher ranked? He beat Alabama.
So they would be higher ranked.
Yeah, there's no way Alabama wasn't higher ranked.
I'm sorry, when they've been unranked.
Oh, okay. That's a big.
I say, wait a minute. No, Johnny Manziel was there.
Yeah, Johnny
They
Manziel
won.
definitely
Wait,
made them. Yeah, and I think Ryan
am I
Tannehill, when he
missing?
was there, he had some games. But yeah, unranked, that makes a lot
Yeah.
more sense. That's crazy.
So they've
Well,
never beaten a team when they've been they never beat a ranked team when they're unranked.
perfect.
Okay,
Give me a. Do you want to start, Tim? Or you want me to go with my card?
you can go first.
All right, I got Oklahoma -2.5, Georgia 12, Pitt -6. BC's good, but I think Pitt's just way more balanced. I think they win by a touchdown. Notre Dame, I have them 3 separate ways. I am the Notre Dame whisperer. I have yet to lose a bet on Notre Dame. I got Notre Dame on the game, -21. I got them first half, -11.5. And I got them first quarter, -6.5. I love first quarter bets. That is so exhilarating. That Clemson first quarter last week, you can't tell me that wasn't the most exhilarating thing ever. Clemson, I got them 14. Mississippi State, I'm done with Kentucky and Kentucky football. I think Mississippi State wins this game. They are the underdogs at +2.5. Give me Mississippi State. I got Florida at the. Oh, I have them at 6.5 right now. Sorry, 6.5. Over. I got the over at 57. That is my card.
All right. Well, I did give out the Texas Oklahoma over at 73. That's just a blind over. I don't really care what the over is in that one. It could be 80, 85. It doesn't really matter. I'm taking Texas Oklahoma over. LSU, I think you're going -14 here. I think they're going to cover that. I don't think Missouri's any good, so that's why I'm getting them to cover. Auburn, -13.5. Arkansas is bad. We just saw Mike Leach being Mike Leach last week. It's going to happen. He's going to have his crazy good games. He's going to have his head-scratching games where you're like, what the hell were you doing? How did you even lose that game? They just played extremely bad. So I'm going Auburn to cover the 13.5. I'm going Syracuse +2.5. This is another case of a team being bad. Duke is horrible. Duke is not that good. So Syracuse is going to win this game +2.5.
I like that.
Or they're going to cover 2.5. If you're giving me 2.5 points,
I
why
like
do I
that.
need it? You're going to take the money line there. Alabama versus Ole Miss. I'm going over in this game. Ole Miss can't play defense at all, but they can put up points still. As good as Alabama's defense is, I still expect Ole Miss to put up a few points on them, causing this over at 69.5 to go over. This is another one of those You've seen both teams play. You're taking the over in this game no matter what. And then my last one is going to be, just like Nate said, Mississippi State plus 2.5. As I said earlier, that was a Mike Leach game last week. Kentucky, I don't think is as good as we thought they were, and they have a little bit of an issue at quarterback. So we're going Mississippi State plus 2.5, and then earlier A&M Florida game, I'm taking Nate on the plus 57.
I'm with you. I'll probably ride with you on that Syracuse one too. I might tweet that out, but I like that. All right, those are our cards. NBA Finals is basically over, right? Are we just accepting LeBron James, the greatest player of all time, and he's
maybe.
champion?
Look, don't be surprised if Miami wins on Friday. I don't think they will, but don't be surprised if they win on Friday. Is all I'm going to say. Also, just backing up a little bit, y'all don't think that Arkansas can do another upset? I mean, they won their first game in like 2.5 years or something.
They won their first SEC game since 2017, and it'll probably be their last SEC game until maybe 2021. I mean, they are not a good football team. Mississippi State played horrible. Arkansas still had no business winning that game, even though they won it. It was all Mississippi State errors here, left and right. It was so bad.
I have to do a retraction. I said that Texas game was bad, but no, that Arkansas Mississippi State game was horrible.
Yeah, that was bad, real bad. Yeah, I think Auburn gets on track there again and kicks the shit out of them.
But I want to see the Lakers win. Right, it'll be great. They went on Friday night. Call it they're the kings of the NBA bubble, and I don't have to hear about Tyler Hero. I don't have to hear about how whatchamacallit didn't play basketball and was looking for a job at the Ringer. I don't have to hear. I'm so tired of Michigan players. I will always be tired of Michigan
Duncan
players.
Robinson or whatever.
Yes, yeah. Duncan Robinson and his smug ass face. I will be glad when I don't have to hear that. Look, Jimmy Butler is a great player. He is. And I don't want to take anything from him. But he has bounced around the league. There's a reason he has. I think that has more to do with his personality than how he fits in on a team. And he has taken over this run for Miami and dominated it, and rightfully so. But there is a bigger story here. That LeBron James has taken this team from out of the finals, out of the playoffs, to their second year. You're here now. We're at the finals. We've brought the Lakers back to glory. How many players have done that?
That's a good question.
To be on the slump that long for the Lakers, and for a team too that's used to winning championships.
Yeah.
That is a story within itself, and I think it's being overshadowed by how scrappy Miami is. And again, I think Miami is a great team. Reminds me a lot of the 2004 Pistons. I just don't think it's their time yet.
I agree with that. They need to add They need to add something inside to compete, I think. I agree with that. My biggest gripe is LA gets every call in the book, but outside of that, I mean, that's just the era of basketball. But
I mean, going back to that game that the Heat won, like watching Jimmy Butler drop 40 without really shooting any 3-point shots, like he dropped 40 by driving the lane. Like you don't see that in today's NBA game anymore.
Yeah, and it's funny you should say that, because in this last game, they just let him stand out there at the 3-point line the whole time because they knew they were just like, all right, he's going to drop. I will say this. The Lakers' collapse on defense is some of the most embarrassing basketball I've ever, and they do it in the last 3.5 minutes of the game. Just forget how to play defense. If I have Anthony Davis, LeBron James, here's the other thing. KCP cannot be your point leader every fucking game for the first half. How does that happen? KCP was here in Detroit. I watched him catch that DUI and then go over to the Lakers. And, if anything, KCP, in my opinion, is the person who is benefiting the most from this Lakers roster, because he is the type of player he is versus his performance on this team. It is greatly overshadowed by he's benefiting a lot from being on this team. If he was anywhere else, he probably wouldn't be in the league right now.
KCP or Kid can't play?
Kid can't play.
That was his nickname here in Detroit. So it's very shocking to see where he is now. Well, I'm not that shocked to see him do what he does because he could always get hot from three. So him being a 3-and-D player on a team with 2 stars is not that surprising either.
And well, he's driving the ball a lot too. And he's like when the Lakers go into a scoring slump, it's usually KCP who gets them started, or Danny Green. But don't get me started on Danny Green.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm happy LeBron. I don't know if I want to say happy, but it is what it is. I mean, it makes sense. He's the best player, best team. I think we all kind of saw the Lakers most likely win this thing out. I'll be interested if they close it out. I think they will eventually, but if they close it out Friday, I think they will. I think they got it. But
I hope they close out. Also, to the call thing, like we all watched The Last Dance, and some of us watched those games with Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan literally changed the rules in the league. So, superstars getting calls, it's a problem, but it has always been happening.
I don't disagree with that. I just feel like LeBron, like every time I turn on the game, and obviously I wasn't alive during the greatness of the Jordan era, so I've only seen the selective things, but like it does feel like every time he drives the lane, well aware of what was going on.
Oh yeah, you're aware.
Sorry, yeah. A lot. That's a bad phrase. I'm half watching the Bucks game. Aware of what was going on. I wasn't really paying attention, but it does feel like every time LeBron drives to the hole, he's complaining about some non-call or a call or whatever. And I'm sure Jordan was doing a very similar thing. As Stephen A. said today, I saw it on Twitter, this is the softest era of basketball ever, which I don't maybe disagree with, but it's also the more skilled era. So, like, just his size, LeBron's size and speed, it's just annoying sometimes to see. And everybody does it. I'm picking on LeBron here because he's just the best player and how big he is. It just feels like every time I turn on the TV and he drives, I'm watching him complain about a no call sometimes. But, yeah, you're not wrong.
It's every time.
Yeah, it's every time. And that's just annoying as hell to watch. But you're not wrong. Jordan, like, people want to, like, pick on LeBron as if he's the only person to ever do this. Jordan also got calls and complained as well. Like, that's not new. It feels excessive with LeBron, especially when he is such a physically dominating player. Oh, the dog just kicked open the door.
Oh, I thought it was something like the Bucks did something and it knocked your TV down.
No, Leia just shot through the door.
Yeah, I hope they close it out on Friday. But if they don't, I won't be surprised.
Yeah,
I won't be surprised if Miami beats the Lakers by 20 because, like when you like teams right before they get to the tournament will lose a crazy game in college because you're just thinking about the tournament. You're not thinking about the game you're actually playing. I think that could happen to the Lakers in this upcoming game.
I'm with you. But all right,
back on this Bucks game real quick. If you ever want to know how much of a Bucks fan Nate is, he really thinks these Bucks jerseys are so fresh. They're not that different. I don't see.
I didn't even.
Dude, they look so fresh and so clean. Especially those garbage we were wearing a year ago.
They're just white jerseys. I mean, unless you're really comparing them to like past jerseys, then you can say that they're so much better. But it's literally just a white jersey with red numbers on it.
Look at my boy Tommy out there getting into Gronk. I mean, come on now.
These are just white jerseys.
Looking clean. They look fresh and clean, all right? Y'all forgetting the jerseys we wore literally last year.
Bucks old jerseys.
You're literally forgetting about the jerseys we were stunning last year, all right? With those the digital clock numbers. This is a sight for sore eyes, this kind of beautifulness on the field.
But I've never seen someone get so excited about a plain white jersey with red numbers and nothing else.
Goddamn right. Little buck ship. Oh. Get up.
No, they're just white jerseys.
Got the little buck ship on the shoulder pads. It's bear hunting season right now in Chicago. All right.
Nate is going to watch the game.
Yeah, we're losing me slowly here. I gotta go throw my Aqib Talib jersey on. All right, people. As always, peace.
Peace.
Peace.